Hi, my name is Lexi Barrow, and today I want to share with you a presentation about the truth about abortion and why it should be illegal. So, in this PowerPoint, we'll discuss current legal stance on abortion, how society itself over time has shaped the idea of abortion, and how it's become commonly accepted. We'll also be talking about the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, uh, file solution of women's rights, humans shouldn't have the theory of life and death, social manipulation that can come from uh, mass social pressure and how that can affect women in their decision when it comes to abortion. We're also going to be talking about the business side of abortion and the physical and emotional effects for both women and men when it comes to abortion. So, about America's current state of abortion. So, Roe v. Wade originally stated that all women could have free access to abortion with no punishment. However, on June 24th and recently of 2022, when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, it basically said, hey, so this is not a federal issue. We're going to hand the power to the states. So the states could individually decide if they wanted to make it legal and accessible, or if they wanted to outlaw it and make it so there are consequences for getting a woman getting an abortion. So overall, the ruling was a 6-3 in the Supreme Court. So that was not a quite majority, but it's still a good passing for when it did get overturned. So what does the Constitution say about it? So this is the original document of when America was founded and the beliefs that it was founded upon. And Jefferson goes to write in the Constitution, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed to their creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and so forth. So America has always been a great supporter and founded on a belief that people's lives, interests, and ability to pursue higher measures, both mentally, physically, and economically, and that they should be achievable and protected by the government. So Jefferson specifically states the right of life and how it's an unalienable rights, so no one could touch it. And so it's also when he stated this, he stated it with the consideration of babies and just all human life, especially as the unborn. And you may say, well, it doesn't directly say that because it just says life, and the definitions that people have for defining the start of life is different. But we'll discuss that more. So society's view on abortion. So in the past, it used to be society's general attitude toward abortion was such that the patient was ostracized and a doctor was disgraced. And then in the present day, it's despite the public pronouncements against its practice, abortions increased, and judicial action against the participants decreased in proportion. So basically, because in the past it was kind of a more rare thing that happened that a woman would have an abortion, so it was seen as such alien behavior, and often women got shunned for doing it. In the present, somehow it's become more of a commonality. So it's oh, people are doing it, it's becoming more common and women are doing it more anyway, so we might as well make it legal. But what kind of sense does that really make if you think about it? So now if we take the idea of oh, it's just become common, let's make it legal and there's no punishment. If we did that with any other sort of law, we would just be a terrible society, as also not only just dysfunctional, but also our safety would be forfeited. So if you take this in consideration of oh, well, a lot of people rob banks a lot, or a lot of uh people, commit murder or manslaughter. If we say, oh, it happens so common, let's just make it legal and give no consequences, you can imagine how that go. That just straight downhill, and nobody would feel safe at any time, and just people would murder to their will. So moving on, but you may consider with some of that stuff is well, what about, if abortion was made illegal, what about, if a pregnant, what if someone's raped? What if someone had incest, where someone was forced to have the baby? We'll talk about that later. But I mean, like I said, some people don't even understand or don't even consider oh, well, a fetus is a living thing. Especially pro-choicers will say, well, the fetus is just a clump of cells, so it isn't a living thing. And there's no and they'll say that on a basis of no like physical evidence. But also you have those are pro-lifers and they're like, yeah, it starts at conception. But we can push that aside for now as we'll talk about it later. But so what about the consideration that a pregnant woman is murdered? Like how many lives were killed then? Was it just one or is it two? So often like a pro-choicer, one who sees a fetus as a clump of cells, will be like, oh yeah, it's not a living thing, so it's just the one woman that was killed, right? However, in Congress, However, Congress approved of the Unborn Victims of Violence Act of 2004. So, and basically that made legislation on a federal level of saying, hey, that pregnant women do indeed carry living fetuses, and that these living humans need to be protected. Their ability and right to live needs to be protected. Um, if someone were to murder a pregnant woman, they would not only be charged for the murder of the woman herself, but also the baby. So they would be convicted of murdering two people. So, and the act confers on unborn children from the point of conception to the child's birth the right to be free from injury or death inflicted by criminal offenders, and it punishes offenders for infringing on that right. That is what Laterzo had to say about the Unborn Victims of Violence Act and the effect that it has. So, what does it mean? So, through the act, the Congress has shown not only the indication and motive of protecting life has been declared in America's birth, so basically, America's foundings have declared yes, unborn babies are indeed life, but also it's been exclusively stated and declared that unborn life isn't considered life, that in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and it's a human right bestowed by God to protect. So, a lot of times people will bring up the argument of, well, it's women's right, it's her body, her choice, right? Well, the thing is though, is that really true? I mean, yes, a woman can choose what she would like to do to her body, but that doesn't mean it's always right. So, and coming on this issue, so pro-abortion has been a rising claim in society, especially of lately. One of the main arguments in supporting abortion is the idea that it's a woman's right. Do what she buys. So, my body, my choice is usually the slogan that comes with that. So, yeah, I believe women should have equal rights to men because the whole thing of the women's rights and women's movement, especially as of late, has been just trying to have women be as equal to men and not be underlings to them. So, I do believe in that sense, but I feel like giving the woman the right to do an abortion, like on her own, like decision, is just too much power to women. Because at that point, you're just giving them the power, like of a god. Because you're saying, "Oh yeah, you're all knowing. You can do what you think is right, but it could be completely wrong." So, sorry, excuse me. So the authority of human life. So if women can make that decision, then they're really just they're saying they're superior to men, which I think is not right because that's not the whole idea of the movement, even though society is probably pushed to the point where the women's right movement is like pushing to be for women to be better than men. But in reality, that's just not right. I mean, everyone should be equal regardless of gender. So for the authority of life, so I think so only God can hold the power of pre-decided life or death, and humans do not have the wisdom and holiness to properly decide that in justification. God created all in their mother's womb. So looking at this part of scripture from Psalms 139 from 13 to 18, it says, For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So in this expert, basically, the Bible is often so the Bible is written by man, influenced by God and the Holy Spirit. So really, God Himself is writing, "Hey, even before you were born, I cherished you and I had plans for you to prosper, and He adored you before you even came out of your mother's womb." So, if God has declared life at what can be most comprehend as if God if God can if God has declared life at which we can mostly comprehend as humans as conception, then humans are unable to declare that for ourselves. So basically, we have no right to declare what is and isn't life and where that boundary point is, because God Himself has written in Scripture that, hey, like as soon as you're conceived, that you're life, you're a living being, and you're being formed and wonderfully crafted. So, but often society is normal. So now it's even more forcing this idea of abortion to make it into a normality. So going back to why the views of abortion through society have changed. So now because it's becoming more of a frequent occurrence, it's becoming a normality. So, but however, what people don't realize is that this is just being it's just becoming a mass moral manipulation. So people saying like, "Oh, this is normal. Yeah, you should get it. There's no downfalls. There's no harm in it. Everyone's doing it." So just even like think about that in terms of just like vaping, especially a huge issue now. Drugs, like any of that. Oh, come to parties. Oh, have sex. Like oh, it'll be do no harm. It's fun. This is kind of a society pushing abortion into that umbrella of hey, everyone's doing it. You should do it, even though that's not the reality of what the actual harm to it is. So, continuing on society's normality, so Gregor Pupic, Pupic, I butchered that. Gregor Pupic, all right, Gregor P, because I cannot pronounce the name. The Director General of European Centre for Law and Justice actively fights for the reform of the European Court of Human Rights, in addition to several other beliefs in freedom. He directly stated that through the frequency with which abortion is used, it forces society to be materialist. It prevents us from invasion on pain of condemning ourselves that the human being has individuality and a soul before birth and independently of its state of consciousness. This forced materialism is also perceived as a liberation which will not be complete until the abortion is totally accepted. Hence, the refusal to listen to the suffering of women who have had abortions, hence, too, desire to make abortion to an everyday act. So, again, this is like pushing abortion into that umbrella of like, hey, come party, hey, come sex, there's no consequences. When in reality, there is consequences. And these are living human beings. These babies, these fetuses, they're living things even before they can breathe for themselves, even before their first heartbeat. They're living things and cells that are multiplying every single day to create what once was you. Like, that's how you came to be. Like, cells multiplying, eventually you got a heartbeat, eventually you start breathing on your own. And through that process, that's how you were born. So, why is it different for a human that isn't physically out of the mother's womb yet? So, under this, after hearing about the society and how it's just turned abortion to a normalized thing, so here's some more questions that may pop up in terms of those who are for abortion. So pro-choicers may bring the argument of all the what ifs. What if the mother isn't ready to raise children? What if they cannot financially afford it? What if, whatever. They find all these what if situations. What if the mom was raped? What if she was forced into having the child by the husband? All these different things. There's always going to be these what if questions. You'll always have them in any situation, not just abortion. But they can be argued about all day. So these are things that are like, you're not going to solve them in a day's time. And, maybe their questions will never be answered. Sometimes life is just like that. However, the important thing is that no parent is ever 100% prepared. Even parents who want kids, they still panic and they still, be like, hey, are we doing this right? Trying to be the best for their child. So no one's always going to be 100% prepared at the end of the day for a kid. But most parents that I know of, and I would hope so, are trying every single day to do what's best to raise their child. But even if it's a terrible parent, the best that the parent can ever do, the best that a mother can ever do, the greatest gift you can give them is their ability to live, and that should not be like our right to take away. It should not be a woman's right. Hey, yeah, you're not going to live anymore, and then not have consequences to it. So we talked about how people feel about in abortion, about in terms of society, and how it's just become more widely accepted. But what about the abortion as a business? What about the clinic itself? Because people say like, oh, these abortions are friendly, and I'm sure they are. But the problem is they only say so much, that and they're just giving you what they need to give you in order to like sell their product, which in this case is doing abortion operation, rather that be through pills or that be a surgical operation. So when we look at this different perspective, so a lot of times abortion clinics will just say, oh, so actually, you know what, here's a direct quote from Abortion What to Expect, and this is actually a website that was from a clinic itself. If you have an in-clinic procedure, the abortion itself will most likely be short, but because of tests, counseling, consent, and recovery, you will likely spend 2 to 4 hours in the clinic and sometimes longer. So, with that being said, this is really the only negative thing they will tell you. I scrolled through that article and I've scrolled through several other clinic articles about what for a woman to expect during abortion. And the only negative thing they said about it was the time, which in this case is the 2 to 4 hours. And even so, even in this negative, in a way, they are turning around and selling it as, oh, it only take 2 to 4 hours. So literally like less than a day. Like only like maybe like only like your afternoon. That's all they'll take for it. But if when they're telling you this, what are they not telling you? Because they're only telling you this one thing about the time. So, because it's a pretty straightforward thing. So, if they're telling you that, then what are they not telling you? So you gotta look through for that and be like, hey, what's this clinic hiding? Because what's this healthcare hiding? Because they want to sell you their business, and if they only tell you that, then there's probably more negatives to it than they will tell you, because then if they tell you, they won't get you to abort. So let's talk about the actual side effects. So, and actually, before we talk about the side effects, so here's some of the prices. So, what they tell you aside the time thing. This is looking at North Carolina specifically because that's where I live. So medication abortion and abortion pill, which is, within 10 weeks of gestation. So it's like the early method of abortion. That can range from $350 to $650. So already that's maybe if you're working without like a degree in your job and you have kind of like minimum wage one of those minimum wage jobs, maybe you only get paid like $10 an hour. That would pretty much be one paycheck of after 2 weeks on a part-time basis. So that in itself, so that's kind of a lot for when you're for a low income person. That's half a month's worth of money for a low income individual. So the suction aspiration or the vacuum abortion, so the baby's like not big enough to abort with by yourself, but they can be with assistance as sucked out of your uterus. That can range from $600 to $1,000. So we're already ranking up a little bit, and this is just the second step up. This is between the 6 and 12 weeks gestation. Dilation and cure. So basically, they make you dilate, and then they probably like scoop the baby out of you physically. So that's between 13 and 16 weeks gestation, and that's $850 to like $1,600. So with that's already racking up there. That's like getting close to like vet bill kind of stuff. That's like hospital visit kind of like money, like brief hospital visit. So and then you get to the final like kind of last minute um thing, which is a dilation evacuation. And that's the 17 to 20 week gestation. So that can range from $1,500 to $2,100. That's the price of like a small car. Like that's insane. And these prices specifically are coming from the Community Pregnancy Center of Lake Norman. So that's in the Lake Norman area. So they may have some effect on how that might be a bit more expensive, since Lake Norman genuinely can be a bit more expensive of the area within North Carolina. However, it probably is not too much different considering these ranges throughout the whole state of North Carolina. So let's talk about the first thing. So the first thing is you could take the pill, right? So that was between like $350 to $600. So the abortion, you walk in, the abortion clinics give you basic explanation. Then, but this basic explanation, what is it? What's missing outside of it? So on the website, abortion what to expect. So the same thing about this is the same source that said, hey, this is like you're gonna walk in. This will take 2 to 4 hours. So on the same source, it lists in a small area on the side. So it was actually kind of hard for me to find on this website because they wouldn't really tell me the side effects. What just taking abortion pills feels like. So after taking the second set of pills, most people experience heavy bleeding and cramping, and pass the pregnancy over the next few hours. The experience is like a miscarriage. So looking at this quote from the website and this, so like looking at this alone, you think, oh, that's not, it's like listing side effects off of medication, right? Just any medication. You got coughing, swelling, whatever. You watch an ad on medication, you get all the side effects that are listed in it, but the people are all happy in it, right? So I feel like reading this, it's just like, oh, it's just, whatever. It's just kind of like a period for women who know, what that feels like. But specifically, what I would like to point out is that they experience heavy bleeding. Women, especially, y'all know how like painful and how like miserable it is to have heavy bleeding. You need to change like tampons and pads all the time, and it's just very inconvenient to your day. Heavy bleeding and cramping. Women don't get through their get through cramping half the time every month without heavy doses of like Advil and pain medicine because it gets so bad. So, imagining this and comparing this to what a miscarriage is, um, for those that have experienced it, I'm sure it is not a great experience, but that's pretty major. A miscarriage is a major life event, and it's actually very traumatic for some women. For a majority of women, it is traumatic, and it's a sad thing to occur. So this is what you'll go through. So already just with the pills, you're putting a woman's already in a lot of emotional distress, a lot of physical distress. So in a lot of ways, it's already like looking like a negative situation. So this is just the pills. This is not the surgical. This is not the dilation and vacuuming. This is just the pills. This is the easiest method for aborting a child, and this is the minimum side effects. Is like a heavy miscarriage. That's a lot to sink in. All right, moving on. So the abortion experience. So continuing to talk about this. So the surgical effects. So now this is the opposite side of the spectrum. We went from the pills, and now this is the like surgical. So this is like last minute abortion, the major operation kind of thing. So it can impact and induce a variety of long term effects for mothers. Some of them include like increased risk for preterm birth. So if let's say like a woman goes and gets a surgical abortion, then later she conceives a child and wants to keep it, it can be increased risk for that child that she wants to keep. For a preterm birth, it can be increased risk for pelvic inflammation, inflammatory disease, uh, infection, and infertility. So you abort this baby, you're like, oh, I don't want it now. Maybe I'll go get maybe I'll have a child later in life, right? You said it wasn't the right timing. Then years later, you settle down, you want a kid. This abortion from earlier years can affect infertility. So it can affect not only you now, but also your family for future. It can also cause uncontrollable bleeding and damage to the uterus. You can permanently damage your uterus from a surgical abortion. Basically, you not only are you like destroying this baby and this fetus, you're like, get this baby out of me, you're also destroying your chance of having like another healthy kid later in life. Like your entire reproduction system you're putting insane stress on that. So that's just physical effects. So for the emotional effects, so it doesn't only affect you for women as a female mother in the long term, but it also can hold major consequences for when you do try to have kids on your own. So a lot of times when women get abortions, it'll affect their fertility and also their ability to keep a child throughout their entire terms for later years. So many psychological effects that women often go through when they face abortions are depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic flashbacks. This, so the depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic flashbacks I got off of Palm Beach Women's Clinic, which is a women's clinic in Florida, and they explicitly said this is the most common thing and side effects that women go through when they go have abortions. So, okay, let's read through this again. So, depression, anxiety, which is kind of like a common thing in today's teens, especially, and us in general as Gen Z, and also for any existing human. But post traumatic flashbacks, let that hit you for a second. Post traumatic flashbacks are often associated with like rape, incest, domestic abuse, and they impact people for lifetimes. Abortion is a traumatic event. It's extremely traumatic and it affects women's physical and mental for the almost can be the rest of their lives. So if you're adding post-traumatic flashbacks, so that means that abortion can now scoot under that umbrella of rape, incest, domestic abuse, trauma. This is how serious abortion is. So a lot of the long-term emotional effects, in addition to what was stated, as depression, anxiety, and the trauma, as humans, our emotional and physical tendencies are often highly linked with one another. So if like you're mentally stressed about something, usually sometimes you might shake or you might nervously tap on the pencil on the desk with your pencil. And so with when we're mentally stressed, we're physically stressed, and if we're physically stressed about something, then mentally we can be stressed. That's just how humans we are as wired, just that mental and physical link. So, anxiety from an abortion can cause sexual tension and heavy physical reaction to occur in response to the invasive process. Because abortion, while they don't tell you much about it, it is a very invasive process. Especially if it's not the pills and it's anything higher up in age of the child that is necessary to properly abort it in terms of clinical health. So that's a very invasive process. They're all up in your uterus, like and most of it it's like they're not very merciful with it sometimes. And I mean even like people women especially, and I'm sure men too, when you go to a doctor, sometimes you have bad experiences because they invalidate your feelings or they touch you without consent or they just do something and you just don't want to go to the doctor anymore because it's a stressful event. This is what how this can apply here when you go to clinics and sometimes they're invasive and it's just not welcoming because it can be stressful. So especially when they have sexual tension, they can affect their life with their partner in addition to all future worry about being pregnant again. This may raise their probability or of infertility and cause an increase in miscarriages. So basically, this affects not only them, but it will affect their relations with their partner in addition to any future plans to start a family later down the line. This can all be due to trauma and anxiety that was planted from women when they went through the abortion process at the clinics, or even just home abortions, any form of abortion. Is this is all linked to it. It's not just the clinics, just abortion as a whole in general. So going on as the partner. So in a study amongst 13 families that underwent selective abortion after a positive detection of defect within use. So basically, these parents had these mothers were had their baby tested, and they found out that they were going to have genetic defects. So it was a study about for those that decided to abort after hearing that they were going to have their kid was going to have genetic defects. So in the study, it was discovered that the incidence of depression following selective abortion may be as high as 92% among women and as high as 82% among the men. Let me say that again. 82% of men who went through abortion with their partner were depressed, in addition to the depressed mothers as a high of 92. So both partners are insanely depressed from this selective abortion. So now this is not just a woman's issue anymore. This is a woman and man issue. This is a human issue. So, and speaking of which, so you're like, well, but it's women who physically go through it. Yes, but men go through it emotionally too. So as I said, 82% of males get depressed after an abortion. That's, that's insane. So it's not mentioned enough about how men are affected by abortions because most times when they do discuss about how they feel about abortions, women often attack and hush them up. So and this is like a toxic society that has become, especially wrapped around this abortion issue and this abortion topic. Because when abortion is discussed in society, often females just get the attention, and females keep it among females almost. But what about the men though? Because really, as women in talking about abortion, they're shunning the men out. They're shunning men's opinions out. Their emotions never get recognized by society in abortions, and also just as a whole. Um, because it's not their body, not their choice. So women should is advertised to have the sole decision of aborting a child. However, the child is created by the males too. You got to remember that females give 50% of the genetics and the males give 50% of the genetics. So it's literally a two-person effort. This is literally a partner effort to create this child and conceive this child. So the decision regarding the child and their health and even just their ability to live should be decided by both parents. So looking at the emotional effects of abortion as a whole, long-term anxiety and depression from abortions can ultimately lead to the downfall of a woman's overall health. We talked about within like a woman's uterus, how that can be absolutely destroyed through an abortion, not only just like physically, but also just from emotional attachment of having any like sexual relations with men and sexual tendencies. Uh, and such depression is often accompanied by feelings of extreme regret, guilt, or shame. Because of this, many women decide to suffer alone and do not seek support. This can lead to alcohol and drug abuse, flashbacks, sexual dysfunction, and suicidal thoughts. So now the women that go through abortion are through regret, guilt, or shame. Often, unlike the men who want to get involved on the abortion topic, they get shunned by society. You're like, no, but you did good. You advocated for yourself. But in reality, that's not how the woman feels. She doesn't feel like she stood up for herself. She doesn't feel like she made the decision for herself. She feels like the law, like she feels the consequences of her actions, and they're not good ones. The decision that the mother would have made about abortion was not, it had long-term consequences to it. When the realization of what their choices cost, the death of an innocent human being, their own child, women often get overwhelmed in their guilt, knowing that they could never go back on the decision. The choice of giving life or death to another human being, rather that be in a war or abortion, is an extremely heavy burden to carry on a daily basis. That's literally, it's like when a mother goes through a depression, goes through an abortion, she goes through major depression and is literally grieving the loss of a human being. That's the natural human response to grief, is often anxiety, depression, and then guilt that you didn't spend enough time with them, shame, uh, that you should have been nicer to them. This is literally the physical and emotional, this is literally the emotional, especially reaction to grief. So, in conclusion, overall, abortion can be a sensitive topic to touch upon as there are so many mixed feelings about it. It is beyond the idea of women's rights at this point, as it directly affects not only the mother herself, but it drastically affects the father and, of course, the child itself. For the sake of humanity's health, what is right under moral reason for the prevention of manipulation from business to women about their health and for the generations have forged a law to protect what is one of the greatest earthly gifts can be given, the chance to live, and it should be considered illegal in the United States to have an abortion. The burden that comes with killing a child is too big and too heavy for a human to carry compared to the joys and benefits that nurturing life can be. Even if you can't bring your child a good life, you can't financially support them or emotionally, giving them the ability to live is still the biggest and best thing you can do as a mother. And I'll leave it on that note. So here are some sources sites. You can pause and look at the specific websites and sources that I used. This is just for some of the information. And then I have some image citations, and then going through. But I hope this impacted you today and that maybe you can just look at it and step away and just take something from it. But anyways, have a good rest of your day and thanks for willing to be educated.